I started developing the ability to say, no, I cannot help you with this, or no, you cannot call me at midnight to tell me about all your trouble. Like I started experiencing freedom, the freedom to say no. Welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. We are your co-hosts, Gene McIntyre, pastor and emotional intelligence coach, and Marybeth Steigenga, counselor and relationship coach. We believe that everyone has an extraordinary story to share. Together, we invite you to embark on a journey of self-discovery as we unravel the profound wisdom that lies in looking back to propel us forward. Prepare to be moved and inspired by tales of unwavering resilience, personal growth, and the pursuit of authentic living, including your own. Join us as we delve into the transformative power of storytelling. Because when you tell your story, you have the potential to change your life. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you can be inspired. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tell Your Story, the podcast. And this is our 7th episode. Marybeth, how about that?
I'm kind of shocked, actually, Jenny. I was looking back at our original plan for this, and I'm pleasantly surprised that we have pulled this off. So, yes, we did it.
Yes. We are both very busy moms, and we have secular jobs, and we have extracurricular activities, and we're crazy enough that we added a podcast. And here we are, episode 7.
Episode 7, yes, and so far so good, I think. So hopefully people are having as much fun as we're having.
Absolutely. And if you have not yet shared the Tell Your Story podcast with a friend, make sure you do, and make sure you tell that friend to share with another friend. Marybeth and I were talking to someone the other day, and they were telling us that a lot of podcasts and these things just bubble up because there are SEO, search engine optimization, whatever, and that very rarely do they happen the old-fashioned way. So let's make this podcast grow the old-fashioned way. Hopefully it will be because you guys are getting benefit out of it. I know Marybeth and I are getting benefit out of it. So make sure that you help us with that. But for those of you that are joining us for the first time, this is my friend Marybeth Steigenga. Marybeth is a counselor and relationship coach. I am Gene McIntyre. I am both a pastor and an emotional intelligence and life coach. And it is our pleasure to join you to talk a little bit about life, our stories, and how our stories have the power to change not only ourselves, but others that we come in contact with. Marybeth, we have spoken about rotten eggs. We have spoken about broken records. If that sounds like a completely different language to you, make sure that you check our prior episodes so you can get caught up. So stop this, go to the last ones, and then come back. But we spoke about those things. We spoke about rotten eggs, broken records, and what we're doing is we're establishing a framework that we are going to use to discuss not only our stories and the stories of our clients, but also the stories of our listeners and our audience. And if you haven't yet, email us so that you can tell us that you want to join us and tell your story and have us evaluate your story and work with you on the basis of this framework that we're discussing. And so again, we spoke about rotten eggs, broken records, and today we are talking about 7 steps to heal. Yes, Marybeth? 7 steps to heal. And Marybeth, I'm going to ask you to take it away, and I will join you on those 7 steps that we are going to cover today. And again, today we are discussing this just as we did last week. We're discussing this kind of like in a little bit of a I cannot speak English, theoretical way, but as soon as we're done with the 7 steps to heal and the 7 steps to move forward, then Marybeth and I are going to use that framework with clients. We brought those cases here to you the other day. And then after that, it's going to be time to start talking to you and your stories. Marybeth and I, we already have 2 of our audience that have kind of add their names to the list. And as more names are added, then we will be using this framework of Rotten X, Broken Records, 7 Steps to Heal, and 7 Steps to Move Forward to continue evaluating those stories. And so, having had that long introduction, Marybeth, take it away.
I was going to say, how do you say theoretical in Spanish, since that's your first language? What's theoretical?
Teoreticamente.
Oh yeah, see, that's too complicated. I'll just stick with theoretical.
Or
Okay.
en teoría. You could say it both ways. So.
Before I get started, I just was remembering a story from when I first met you, and your kids were tiny, and you were still trying to speak Spanish and English in your home, right, to try to help them learn. And I remember JC. He was so cute, so cute. He's still cute, but he was so cute, and with his curly little hair, and I don't know, he always had like something soft, and you were saying suave. This is suave, and he was like having no part of it. He was like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not playing that game with you, Mom."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hence,
Yeah.
I failed miserably in raising bilingual children, but now after being of certain age, they're discovering how absolutely important it would have been to learn the language. So hopefully they'll get caught up.
Hopefully they will. Hopefully they will. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of be looking off to the side because I got my little notes over here. So I'm trying, not ignoring you, but I'm trying to stay on task here. But so 7 steps to repair your broken record. The first one we had was decision time. And it was to identify the changes we need to make in order to heal. And in our notes, we also had in parentheses, or not. If you don't want to, that's a valid choice. You do not have to. This is the healing is a choice theme that we're doing. So, but if you do want to do some healing, there are some things that you're going to need to do. And this is your plan of action time.
But it starts with that decision.
Yep. It starts with the decision, and everybody's plan is going to look different, right? We talked about that the other day, how you and I approach things from a different way. So everybody is going to have a different plan. And I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong way to heal. I think you do what works best for you. Some people are going to want to, read a bunch of stuff or listen to podcasts or, do magazine articles or whatever. Other people are going to want to be like, I'm going to go get myself a counselor or a coach who's going to help me navigate some of these things. Or I'm going to find me a support group that I can be part of that can help me navigate some of the changes that I need to make to heal from my past and move forward. So yeah, so decision time, that's the first step. And then we said to establish firm boundaries, right? So once you realize that you have a boundary issue, and Jenny, you can speak to this, once you realize what a boundary was and that you didn't have any, you needed to make some changes and establish some of those boundaries. Not easy to do.
Not easy to do. I started seeing you at almost age 40 when I was about to deliver JC. And probably the most significant boundary that I established in my life, I established it at age 45. So it took me a while. My issue, as many of you know, was a very dictatorial, self-centered mother who kept badgering me emotionally, even after I got married and was living 3,000 miles away. And as a believer, unfortunately, we tend to take the Bible out of context and we hold on to passages like honor your mother and father. And in my mind, it was impossible to create boundaries for my mom without dishonoring her. I have discovered years later that probably one of the best ways to honor my mother was to do exactly what I did. because I held her accountable to her behavior. And as a result, she now realizes that she can choose to behave in a specific way. She can choose to violate other people's boundaries and hurt their feelings and badger them. But now she knows there's a consequence attached to it. One of the things that my brothers and sisters tell me all the time is that through my no contact with my mother, establishing that firm boundary, I have allowed them to have a much better relationship than they ever had. Because she realized for the first time, hold on, I can lose a child. I can push a child to the point where they won't want to do anything to do with me. Now, the beautiful thing for our audience is that at the beginning, it had to be very, very strict boundary. Now I see my mother maybe once a year. And when we do see each other, we have a very healthy, though superficial relationship. But I think the important thing about establishing firm boundaries is that if we are fighting trauma and trying to heal, yet we continue exposing ourselves to the source of that trauma, it's like going to the hospital because someone shot at me, have that bullet removed, and going back to be shot again, right? It's going to be a never ending re-injuring process. And so I knew, and this is one of the things that I communicated to my mom on that fateful day when I had to tell her, Mom, I've told you that I'm seeking therapy. I've offered to pay for yours. You're not doing it. And our relationship continues to really, really hurt me. And I told her, I said, if I am going to heal, I cannot continue exposing myself to your constant badgering. And I said, and if I am going to become a better mother and a better wife, I need a better example. And being exposed to you, whether I like it or not, has an impact in the way I conduct myself. Now, that was not an easy conversation to have, but it was a conversation that needed to be had. And I have never, I mean, for the next 3 months, it was very hard, but I have never felt freer after that. And I believe that my improvement that I had seen until that moment grew by leaps and bounds after I started that no contact relationship with my mom. And I think the relationship that we do have now, though superficial, is a lot more positive. There's a lot more of respect, and she understands where she starts, where she ends, where I start. And I don't think she would have learned that had I not established that very firm boundary. So again, that point number 2, establishing firm boundaries, is identifying the source of the trauma and making sure we're not continually exposing ourselves to that source.
Yeah, and I'm sure that her response wasn't, when you said that initial conversation, wasn't like, "Oh, Jenny, thank you so much for setting this boundary, and I'm going to change my behavior right now." Right? I'm sure she wasn't very excited about having this boundary set.
I say this in my book, but her reply to that was, "Then pay me everything you owe me." Because in her mind, and she probably learned this from her mother, who learned it from her mother. In her mind, because I was her child, I owed her. I owed her. I owed her money. I owed her my life. I owed her my mental stability. She's like, "Oh, you're going to go no contact with me? Well, pay me everything I've ever done for you." Which makes no sense, but that's where she was mentally. And I think, again, like you say, Marybeth, she was not very happy then, but she certainly has learned a lot. And another important thing is that whoever is causing you trauma, if you have spoken to that person, written letters to that person, and you are not seeing any changes, try separation.
Yeah.
Because at least in my case, I went a lot farther by establishing a separation between me and my mother that I did I had spoken to my mom, I had quoted books, I had shared research with her. Nothing ever worked. And although she is not completely abandoned her ways, the best thing that worked for us to have the kind of relationship we have right now, was for me simply to say, I will no longer allow you to badger me this way. I will no longer subject myself to this treatment. And when anything else fails, when any other type of boundaries fail, maybe it's time for a physical boundary.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes if you don't feel like you have the strength to set a different kind of a boundary, sometimes you have to just do the physical boundary, right? Because that gives you that gives you the ability to do that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so we tagged on the end of firm boundaries for step 2 is to kind of throw away what's not helping you or what's not serving you anymore. So yeah, so kind of look at as far, and that can be relationships, right? You might have toxic relationships you need to kind of get rid of. It could be habits.
Yes. And I will
Yeah,
tell you something, Mary Beth. I think that once we get started cleaning the things or getting rid of things that don't, so has it ever happened to you that you're attached to a specific piece of furniture or something that you don't want to get rid of, right? And then all of a sudden you get rid of that thing and then you're on a row and you start identifying things that you don't want in your house and you start throwing away or making that back for Goodwill or Easter seals, and all of a sudden you got rid of a lot more. And I think that's what happens when you start getting rid of the source of your trauma. In my case, I started with my mom, and then I had other people in my life that were like black clouds that, and with them, it wasn't necessarily a complete no contact, but I started developing the ability to say, no, I cannot help you with this, or no, you cannot call me at midnight to tell me about all your trouble. Like I started experiencing freedom, the freedom to say no. And I think ultimately that is what establishing firm boundaries is all about, is the freedom to say, no, this is not good for me. Therefore, no.
yep, yeah, and that's all you have to say is no. You don't have to explain yourself. No is all you got to say.
Absolutely.
Um, Okay, so then step number 3 is to create a healthy support system or accountability team. The key word in there is healthy. So as you're looking at people in your life that you're setting boundaries with, who are the people that are going to be truth tellers, that are going to tell you the truth, but have a little grace sprinkled in there too, right? So truth and grace. Who are those people in your life? Maybe you don't have any. You need to go out and find some. And sometimes that starts with a counselor, right? Even
Absolutely.
though that, or a coach, because they are going to be truth tellers, but do it with some grace. And they can model what a healthy relationship looks like so that you can go out and say, okay, I need to make some changes and find some help.
And I think when we create a healthy support system, we have to also be very intentional about it. Because I think that when you are revisiting your trauma and telling your story, as I think we've said in prior episodes, anxiety, stress, sadness can get hold of you, and you can fall into the trap of isolating yourself, right?
Yeah.
But as you were saying a minute ago, Mary Beth, we need to very intentionally go get those friends. I mean, my favorite book says, he who wants friends should show himself to be a friend, right? And I think that, as we've said before, it's very easy to just stand in a corner and say, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me. Well, care for someone and be intentional about creating friendships. And also be intentional about saying what works and what doesn't work. Because sometimes people, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning and says, today I'm just gonna mess with my friend, or I'm gonna be mean. Or most people sometimes are completely oblivious if they're having a negative impact. So it is also important to start saying, I don't like this. I don't appreciate this. Can you, at least give people the opportunity to apologize and to amend their behavior before you either discard them or decide that you are not going to pursue their friendship.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you have, if you're a people pleaser like I am, you don't like to, and I don't really love confrontation, so that seems super scary to me. But you do need to do it. And sometimes what helps me is if I'm having a misunderstanding with someone, if they've said something and we're going to talk about this in a little bit too. If I've heard it through my filter and I was like, oh my gosh, that really hurt my feelings, is for me to say something like, hey, the story I'm telling myself right now is that think I'm a bad friend, or you think that I don't have good boundaries, or the story I'm telling myself is And that gives that, instead of saying like, hey, that was mean, don't say that, then that gives that person a chance to come back and go, oh my gosh, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, right? And then you don't escalate into a confrontation. You can just say, hey, what I heard you say, what I'm hearing through my filter is that you think this. And then I would say 99% of the time when I use that phrase, the response is, that's not what I meant at all. What I meant was, and then I can move forward, right? And you have those good, meaningful conversations. So
I
that's always
love that.
helpful.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then you have to determine, you have to like sit back and allow what that person is telling you and determine whether that's truly sincere or whether that person's just trying to be manipulative, right? Because somebody it can go either way. But I
Yeah.
agree with you, Marybeth. That phrase really empowers the other person to have an opportunity to explain themselves. And I
Yeah.
think that takes us directly to our point 4, which says change the way you speak or change the way you listen. And you spoke about filters, and I have a whole separate session on filters, but basically what that means is that the way we were brought up, the trauma we've experienced, all those things have an impact in the way we process information, right?
Mhm.
And so we at some point we spoke about John coming from a very abusive environment and how his method of handling conflict of predilection was to hide, and how
Yeah.
in my case, being the eldest of 7 and a poor family, always pushing forward and having to press on, my preferred way of resolving conflict was head on. Let's face it and let's fix it. And so John's filter was conflict is negative and I have to hide from it.
Mhm.
My filter was conflict is good. Let's talk this over and get it resolved. And so from that perspective, when John would hide away, it was hard for me to visualize it as he is still stuck as a very small child that's afraid to be abused by his dad. He's stuck in that situation. He's acting out of trauma. My filter said he doesn't want to do something that's really good, right? On the other hand, John's filter of detesting conflict and detesting confrontation would look at me and said, she's mean. She wants to attack me. She wants to hurt. So those are filters, right? Those are filters that greatly distort, right? The communication of the message that someone's either behavior or words are trying. And so in this number 4, we need to make sure that we evaluate what those filters are and that we change the way we speak and the way we receive based on those filters. Like try to discern between what's reality and what's something that I'm making up as a result of the filters that I'm putting forward. Marybeth?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think my phrase of the story I'm telling myself right now is this, because that allows that other person to come back and go, okay, that's not what I meant. What I really meant was this. And man, human relationships are tricky, right? I mean, it's just tricky because we all have filters and we're all have different experiences. And so navigating them can be tough. But I always tell people, if you have two people who want to be healthy and can go for it, you can work through anything, right?
Absolutely.
You can work through anything. So but yes, you got to evaluate those filters and figure out those things. I grew up in a home where my parents never raised their voices to each other ever. I never saw them fight, not once. And so my idea of marriage was that you do not raise your voice to your spouse. My husband grew up in a home where, not that they yelled, they're loud. They're loud people, but they did yell, and they're very strong personalities, my in-laws. And so they fought. And they've been married 60 years and they love each other, but they fought it out. So he grew up in a home where it was okay, like that made sense. And so I remember the first like real like knockdown drag out we had, and I raised my voice and he raised his voice, and then I was just devastated. Like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get divorced because you don't fight with your spouse. And he's like, what's the big deal? That's what we do. So it is just interesting how those early childhood experiences impact how you interact with, your closest people in your life. I was gonna say, step number 5. Now we've developed our plan of action, we've set our boundaries, we've built our support system up, right? And we have looked at our filters, and we're hopefully changing the way we speak and listen. Man, this gets harder and harder as we go farther down. But 5 is to identify and practice 2 steps to stop reinforcing your broken record or your core belief, right? Your broken record. So one of my core beliefs is I'm not smart enough. And so what did I need to do in order to stop reinforcing that? Well, I mean, step number 1 was recognize it. I need to recognize that that's happening. And then, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, maybe say things to myself like, hey, you do have this certification and you did complete your master's degree and you do have, you did graduate from college. And so obviously I'm not unintelligent. And so I had to kind of to practice then reciting the things of my accomplishments to kind of overcome that core belief that I'm not smart enough. And so I don't know, do you have an example of what you've done to overcome some of yours?
Do you have a step 2?
Oh, well, okay, so that was one. And my other one that I actually probably comes before reciting my accomplishments to myself is to actually, a lot of times I just say, stop it, like out loud to myself, not in front of other people because they might think I'm strange. But if I'm alone, I'll just say, stop it, Marybeth, stop it. Because that is enough to like flip my brain so that then I can go into step 2, which is you have graduated from college, you do have this certification, so those are 2 things that I do regularly to help overcome that.
Good. My 2 steps, and I'm going to use as an example the steps, what I did when I was under your tutelage, because in a lot of ways, I've just kept replicating the same. Like, these are my favorite 2 steps. Number 1, it was that card, just one little card that said either no or stop, and I kept it on the mirror in our bathroom. I kept it on the refrigerator, and I even kept it in my purse, and I even kept it on my desk. No, stop, right? That was the first thing, like stop myself in the tracks. And then number 2, it's that little powerful but painful phrase of redirecting my thoughts. And redirecting my thoughts, I realized, was very, very hard to do if I was inside of my own mind. So what I learned to do to redirect my thoughts was literally to distract myself. I kept certain books near to me. If I was at work, I would say, okay, what am I thinking? I have this project to do, this project to do. I started doing to-do lists. I always did to-do lists, but I think I started being even more intentional about doing to-do lists, because when my mind would start wandering into those negative thoughts, I could bring it back, right? And so, yeah, those, and Marybeth, why do we say 2 steps? Because we could tackle 5 or 10 or 20 steps. So why do we say in this point 5, identify and practice 2 steps?
Well, right, like you said, you could do 100 steps. And you do have to find the 2 steps that work for you.
Exactly.
I think for me, the reason I say 2 is because that's pretty easy, right? It's not because actually doing it is hard. I don't want people to have to remember 14 steps to actually do it. So if you can remember like stop and redirect, or, no and distract. Those are easy things to remember, and it's a muscle you have to train yourself to do. I used to early in my counseling when I was in my 30s, I used to keep a little box on my kitchen counter. And if I was having a negative thought or something that was causing me like a lot of anxiety or worry, I would write it down on a piece of paper and I would put it in the box. And then I would say to myself, I'm not allowed to think about that right now. It's in the box and I can't. And so if it would pop back up, I'd just be like, nope, it's in the box. Can't be in my
Fantastic.
head, it's in the box. And so I did that for a long time. And then if I really wanted to later, I could go pull it out of the box and look at it. But usually what happens is later, you don't care about it anymore.
It loses its
So,
importance, right? Yeah.
right.
And so at the end of the day, it's kind of like what you say, Marybeth, different things are going to work different for other people. We
Yeah.
can think about, like, for you, maybe writing works, maybe putting on music and dancing, maybe calling a very trusted friend, maybe work on that project that you have been postponing for days or years. I mean, whatever works for you, but I love the idea of two and two alone. Practice those two, become an expert on those two before you move to the next one, because sometimes we just try to bite a lot more than we can chew. So I think that identifying and practicing two steps until we can master them, I think is a fantastic idea.
Yeah. So those are and again, don't just do it once and be like, well, that didn't work. Because it doesn't work after one time. It
Yeah.
takes some consistent, and that is the word practice. So you gotta practice.
Yes.
Step number 6 is fail better, as Jenny said, fail better, or as I like to say, suck less tomorrow. So if you and you are going to fail, that's just part of the healing process. You're gonna fall down and mess it up. So and again, I said this I think last episode or the one before, is you can apply this principle to almost every area of your life. You can apply it to healthy eating and weight loss and exercise. And, you fall off the wagon. What do? Well, that was bad, and I'm going to do better tomorrow.
Yeah. The sooner we admit what's obvious, and that is that we are going to fail, the faster we'll dust up, get up, learn, obviously, like take a look at what I'll do a simple one, right? Like, I love ice cream. I mean, I love ice cream. I can have a lot of ice cream in one sit down. I have a small stomach, but when it comes to ice cream, girl, I can pack it.
You can pack it in.
When I fall in the deep end with ice cream, when I buy a lot of ice cream and have it in my freezer.
Yeah.
So what do? I don't buy ice cream unless I'm having a party. And so what do? Because you have to be reasonable too. If I feel like ice cream, I go through a drive-through and get an ice cream cone. Or I buy something that I know I can eat it, but I'm not going to have a pint on my freezer that I can pull out and eat. You know what I mean? So that's how I fail better, right? Like, maybe when I went through the drive-through to eat ice cream, maybe I shouldn't have done it. Maybe I did it too often. But let me tell you, that failure is much better than when I had the pint in the freezer and I pulled it out and ate the whole thing. So that's what we call fail better. Understanding that we are going to make mistakes, we are going to weaken in our resolutions, but maybe using what we know has helped us fail before and apply it, start all over again and apply what we've learned so that we stumble a little less or a little slower than we did the last time.
Yep, for sure. I love ice cream too, so now I have a craving for ice cream, which is
Me too.
okay. And so now we're on to the last step number 7.
Oh, Marybeth.
What?
Before you go to point 7, a
Yes.
great way to fail better or to suck less tomorrow is to have an accountability partner.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And like sometimes, as you were saying earlier today, that accountability partner, that accountability partner can be a friend, right? But when it comes to trauma and dealing with deep-seated issues, sometimes the best accountability partner that you can have is a counselor, a life coach, emotional intelligence coach. I mean, you name it. And as we've said before, let's not avoid talking about the obvious. Marybeth, you and I do this for a living. So to our friends that are listening and that are watching, if you already have a coach, if you already have a counselor, then you stick to that person. If it's working for you, pursue it. If it's not working for you, or if you haven't tapped into anybody yet, email Marybeth and or I. You can see our web pages are right there plastered in this video, and you can see our email at the beginning and at the end of the podcast, and sometimes in the middle of the podcast. And reach out because a great way to fail better or to suck less tomorrow is to have an accountability partner that is not only going to hold you accountable, but it's also going to teach you new tools and tools that probably are more specifically applied to your situation. And you can accomplish that through counseling and or life coaching. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, both of us are not good. I'm glad you said that. Both of us aren't good at the self-promotion thing. But it is true. If you have somebody that's working for you, great. If you're looking for someone, either Jenny or I would love to work with you. That's where our passion is to
yes,
helping others overcome some of the stuff that we've learned.
yes.
Okay. Number 7, clean up your mess. And in parentheses, we said, or try to. So what did we mean by clean up your mess?
Well, I think it's extremely apparent to you, Marybeth, to me, and to our listeners and audience that when you start discussing these topics, it is unavoidable to go back to an old experience and an old relationship and identify not only the damage that has been done to us, but how we've damaged others.
Yep.
I always say, as it relates to my discovering my problems with boundaries and that my mom was a narcissist and all that stuff, that when I started reading books and learning with you about these things at the beginning, I was looking at my mom. I was like, that's my mom. That's my mom. Oh my gosh, that's my mom. That's what my mom does to me. But as I continued, I said, oh, shoot, this sounds a lot like me.
Yeah.
Oh my. And so then my attention switched from how screwed up my mom was to how screwed up I was and how I needed to change and how I needed to take responsibility. Now, I will be honest, there were relationships that had come and gone, and there was nothing I could do because I had lost contact. There was no way to reach out to those individuals. Or even if I had the opportunity to reach out, it was probably not the wisest thing to do, right? But there were other immediate people, who were they? Were my husband, my daughter, who was like 5 years old, um, and people that were still very close to me. And so when we talk about cleaning up our mess, is recognizing that hurt people hurt others. When we are hurting, we tend to hurt others. We don't do it on purpose. Sometimes it comes from a place of pain and from our subconscious, but we do. We say mean things, we do mean things. Sometimes we don't mean it, but we do it. And I think that part of our healing process is acknowledging those shortcomings, and whenever possible, try to go back to those individuals that we've hurt and ask for forgiveness, or try to find a way in which we can restore that relationship, right? Sometimes if you don't feel comfortable talking to that person, you can write a note. Sometimes if you are not sure how to even approach it, maybe bake a cake or invite that person to lunch, or say, hey, I'm reading this book, or I joined this podcast and I'm learning so much. And let me tell you what I'm learning, like get started though on your road to recovery, because just as you yearn for the people that have hurt you to acknowledge that they've hurt you, there's probably people in your life that have the same yearning and longing, and it will do you a world of good It will be part of your healing process if you clean your mess, or at least try. At the end, there's going to be people that are going to want to do nothing with you. There's going to be people who are going to say, hey, you know what, too late. I don't want anything to do with you. But if you've done your very best, then that's part of your healing. And that's where your part of the responsibility ends and their parts of the responsibility start. And that's boundaries right there. Boundaries means that you can ask, you can apologize, you can try to restart the relationship, but you have to understand if the person doesn't want to continue having a relationship with you. But as it depending on you, you did what you needed to do to solve the situation. And that's probably as far as you can get. But I promise you, it will be hard, but it will be very restorative. So Marybeth, let's recap before we wrap up this podcast.
All right.
Number 1.
Decision time, right? Identify the changes and develop a plan of action.
Or not.
Or not, yep.
But the important thing is that your healing process starts with a decision. To heal or not to heal, that's the question.
Yeah, that's the question, right?
Number 2.
Number 2 is your favorite one, is establish firm boundaries.
Yep. We need to stop the trauma. We need to stop the pain. And so we need to understand where it comes from and stop it on its tracks.
Yep. Number 3, Jenny, is create a healthy support system or accountability team. Yep, that's number 3.
On the word healthy, right?
And sure.
Be intentional about it. Be intentional about it. It's not going to just come and fall into your lap. So you're going to have to be intentional about going out and looking for healthy people and make them part of your circle.
Yep, exactly.
Hopefully, Marybeth, we are part of that healthy support system that our friends are seeking. We would like to think that we're part of that.
Yes, right. We can be part of that. Yes, that healthy system, for sure. And all the listeners together, we can think of ourselves as a support group for each other. So
yes.
Number 4, change or choose to change the way you speak and listen. So that's the filters again.
Exactly. Consider all the elements you're bringing, the things that you've been exposed to that have an impact in how you give information or receive information, and identify what's fact from fiction and start changing it, right? And Marybeth, you use a very powerful question that can help us with that. And what was that?
Right. So I like to say the story I'm telling myself is, and then let that other person respond to that.
Exactly.
I find that it keeps me calm because I don't have to escalate and say, like, that really pissed me off when you said that. Like, I don't have to do that, right? I can just be like, hey, the story I'm telling myself is, and then they can respond it doesn't make them defensive either.
Absolutely, because you're taking responsibility for how you're receiving the information. And at the same time, giving them grace and giving them the opportunity, even if what they meant was not the nicest thing, you're giving them the opportunity to amend with dignity.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, identify and practice 2 steps to reinforce, or what? To stop reinforcing those broken records or core beliefs that we've developed.
Right. And so we named a couple of them, saying stop or no. You carried a card that said no on it. Redirecting your thought. I said you could put it in a box and not think about it. Singing, dancing, calling a friend, reading a book, all of those things. Go to the movies, right? Anything to redirect. Go clean out a closet that needs to be cleaned out. Whatever. Anything to get your mind in a different direction.
And we said that although we can have a lot of steps, focusing on 2 is always a good idea because it's attainable, it's measurable, and maybe we seek to master those 2 steps before we establish 10 different ones.
Right. And try some out and find what works. Not everything works for everybody. So try what works for you.
Yes.
What is number 6, Jenny?
Fail better or suck less tomorrow. I love your,
That's
I love the
tomorrow.
way you call it. And I
That's how
think,
I am.
I think exactly. I think that the way we call the same principle speaks loudly about the differences in our personalities and styles, and I love it. So yeah, whatever you want to call it, suck less or fail better. The important thing is to know that we are imperfect people, that this is a journey, that we are working hard to overcome our trauma and our negative experiences and those negative core beliefs or broken records. And that because we are imperfect, we are going to fail. And we need to be aware that that's going to happen. And we just need to learn to get up and try all over again. Give ourselves grace every day to make mistakes and to start all over again, and never give up from this journey of self-recovery.
Yep, for sure. Right. You could say to yourself, wow, I ate a pint of ice cream today. And then tomorrow get up and go, oh, I ate a pint of ice cream. Well, too bad. I'm just going to eat a pint every day. Right. You could choose to do that. Not
Exactly.
helpful.
No,
Or you can say, well, that wasn't so great, but today I'm going to choose not to eat a pint of ice cream.
exactly. I love it. I love it. And number 7, Marybeth, is
Clean up your mess or try to. So that's like looking at all of the injury that we might have caused as a result of our pain and hurt, and trying to restore, fix, and repair some of those things. And we said, keep your side of the street clean.
yes. And that's going to take humility, and that's going to feel very risky. And don't do it 1 minute before you feel you're ready and gain all the strength that you need. But when you do it, you are going to experience another level of healing. Yeah, when you extend that that olive branch to the people that you've hurt or impacted, and you're going to be able to bless them and bless yourself in the process.
Yeah, so that wraps up episode 7. And I hope everybody is gonna work on some of those steps before they join us for next week's episode. And Jenny and I were talking before we hit record. We were like, man, sometimes we don't practice all of these steps.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a good reminder for both of us to kind of jump back in and do that.
Yeah, and I think that's important to say over and over again. Make no mistake about it. We all of us are human beings, and we are in process, and Marybeth and I are no exception. And we believe in transparency, which is why this podcast is called Tell Your Story. And our stories are open books for you to read and know that we too suck and fail sometimes, right? We just try to do it better, and we get to do all that in community, and that's powerful right there. Marybeth, what do we have to look forward to for next episode?
Well, next episode number 8, again, we're going with the number of perfection 7. So now we're talking about 7 steps to move forward. So you've repaired your broken record. Now it's 7 steps to kind of move forward. And what are those? So I'll just give you a little teaser. The first one is to know thyself.
Know thyself. I like it. We can't wait to see you in our next episode. Start practicing the 7 steps for healing, and we're looking forward to connecting with you again soon.
Yeah, and comment and let us know how it's going. We'd love to hear how your practice is going.
We read each and every one of your comments, and they encourage us to move forward. So remember, we also need encouragement. So make sure you're leaving those comments, okay?
All right, Jenny, it was good to see you again, and I'll see you next time.
Bye. Take care.